Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and welcome to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's very special guests are the Paleo parents, Matt and Stacy, and they just came out with their new book, Beyond Bacon. It's a totally rocking book. We have lots of fun topics to cover today. Before we get to that, I wanted to let you know that in the world of Fat Burning Man and Civilized Caveman, we have a really exciting announcement. We're coming out with an app for the iPhone and the iPad that will be available on July 23rd. And it's basically a collection of over 200 of some of George's best recipes, entrees, breakfast, desserts, and everything in between. And we're going to be offering it for the first couple of weeks at just 99 cents for people who want to get their hands on some of George's recipes. And it's a really slick, cool app. We spent a lot of time, months and months of this past year putting it together and making sure it's well designed and easy to use, and I think you're really going to like it. So if you're the type of person who is into apps, make sure that you visit fatburningman.com. Check out some of our blog posts that are written about it. We have some screenshots, so if you're interested, head on over to fatburningman.com. All right, on to the show with the paleo parenting power couple, Matt and Stacy. We talk about why you should consider picking up some head cheese, how to render fats at home, how to raise healthy, happy, and well-fed kids, and how eating buckets of lard can actually make you lean. All right, let's go hang out with them. All right, folks, the paleo parenting power couple, Stacy and Matt, are two very busy people. They run the blog paleoparents.com, have authored two amazing books. Their newest, Beyond Bacon, will be available July 2nd, and are the proud parents of three very awesome little cave kids, Cole, Finian, and Wesley. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I was just telling you before this call that your newest book, Beyond Bacon, is one of the weirdest I've ever seen in the cooking space, which is so awesome. It's the ultimate compliment because we get to talk about things like head cheese.
Yeah, so, who else is talking about that right now?
Exactly. So can you guys talk about, just generally speaking, how you got into all of the old traditions as it comes to food, eating the whole hog, as it were, and other things like that? What attracted you guys to that in the first place?
Well, I think there were a number of things that attracted us. For the most part, it was financially driven. Mm-hmm. It's cheaper to buy a whole animal and then, use all the parts that you get rather than buying the same cuts over and over again. It's oftentimes 2 or 3 times the price per pound to buy muscle meat at a, even at the grocery store, let alone from a sustainable farm.
Sure.
And then, we started really learning the health benefits of sustainably raised, humanely raised animals, not just for their health benefits, which to someone who was a vegetarian for 7 years, I have a passion for, humanely raised animals. That was important, but also the health benefits to us. Mm-hmm. The meat from specifically pigs is higher in CLA, it's higher in vitamin D, and a lot of the things that are important to our health that we weren't getting from the Costco kind of meats that we were having to purchase, because that's what we have a large family. Our kids are extremely active and they eat a ton. And so, we can't just, we're not 1 or 2 people. It's not feasible for us to be purchasing all of our meat from a farmer's market at such high prices. So when we started purchasing whole hogs, like 18 months ago, we were left with all this stuff at the bottom of the freezer that we never wanted to use. And liver, kidneys, tongue, just a bunch of stuff that always was sitting at the bottom of the freezer. And finally I said to Matt, we need to learn how to use this, not just because we need to use it because it's being wasted otherwise, but also it's really healthful. Organ meats in general are extremely up to 10 or 100 times more nutrient dense than the muscle meat. I'm like, there's no reason that we shouldn't be figuring out how to eat this stuff.
Yeah.
So we endeavored to start, and then it kind of created this journey for us where we realized the whole paleo community is talking about the importance of these things: humanely, sustainably raised animals, helping the earth, helping your health, eating organ meats. Every single paleo person I know that I talk to is starting to incorporate these facets into their lifestyle, but there isn't a tool to help people figure out how to do that in an unintimidating, way. And so our goal was to try to come up with recipes that were delicious ways to eat these foods that made people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that also were somewhat unintimidating. You know, we try to take the guesswork out of a lot of this stuff. So when you order a whole hog, the first time you do it, you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't know, you know, how many pounds it is. You don't know what kind of cuts of meat. Your farmer will ask you questions and you might not have a clue on how to answer them. So we wanted to create a book that not just was the recipes on how to solve these problems, but really kind of walked people through everything that they needed to do without any guesswork at all. And then feeling comfortable, like, okay, I can do this. And 99% of people aren't going to make head cheese, but for the people that are ready to do that, who want to buy a whole head, which is like 30 pounds of meat or something for $5, most farmers will give it to you or charge you $5. Like, if that's something you want to do, it's huge for your health. It's extremely affordable. And there's a lot of muscle meat on a head that you don't realize your butcher will cut for you.
Yeah.
And then just boil the skull. It's fun. It's weird, but you're from Austin, so you appreciate weird.
That's right. I definitely do. And it's so cool because I had seen a few books that are similar, but in the sense that they would walk you through the whole process from chopping the head off and butchering the whole hog, and then kind of like some recipes like that. This is much more functional, it seems like, and a little less scary for at least Americans who aren't all about the whole process.
Yes, it's the suburban.
It's a suburban way to
yeah, exactly. Well, it is. And that's good because it can help get people on board with this message, which is that we should be eating the whole animal, that we need to care about sustainability and things like that, even if we're not chopping the heads off ourselves.
Right. And that's, you know, that's for those people who are listening and freaking out right now, that's the advice in the book, right? The advice in the book is your butcher will take care of it for you. Tell him you want the tongue removed. You want all the muscle meat removed. You want X, Y, and Z done. You want the bones quartered so you don't have to see the whole skull and then it's just bones. Like, ask your butcher. He'll take care of it. It doesn't have to be intimidating, but it's not all head cheese. I mean, there is a whole animal.
There's a whole animal.
That's the most common question we've been getting is like, is it all organ meat? Like, is an animal all organs? No, I guess.
It's mostly regular stuff that you will actually not be intimidated by. It will look like something. It's either meat or it's meat on a bone for the most part.
Well, there's a lot of vegetables and desserts too, because we use lard, because there's so much fat on a pig. You have to figure out how to use lard. And so there's a lot of lard, you know, lard and stock recipes, because those are staples and health additives as well.
And people think about meat in particular, and especially pigs, as being very expensive. But I was shocked. We were up in New Hampshire last year and we got a bunch of lard to render ourselves. And it was so cheap. It was incredibly cheap.
And it lasts a really long time.
Yeah, it does. And it's so easy to cook with. We used it for a lot of baking. We used it for a lot of, you know, frying and skillet stuff. And it's just extremely versatile. A lot of people are scared off, though, because of all of the trash talk around lard, which may or may not be correct based on bad lard, right?
Yeah.
But if you're talking about good lard, can you talk about some of the health benefits if it comes from a healthy animal?
Yeah.
Well, to begin with, it's going to be higher in omega-3s because it's eating a natural, non-grain-based diet for the most part.
Or even if there's a little bit of a grain, the pig is an omnivore, so it's actually natural to its diet.
Yeah.
Right. And on top of that, it's one of the only sources of food sources of vitamin D. You know, everybody knows that you get vitamin D from the sun, but you know, some people live in northern climes where you're not going to get a whole lot of vitamin D from the sun. Lard is a source of vitamin D. On top of that, unlike what people would have you believe, lard is not at all 100% saturated fat that you need to be scared of, even if you are scared of saturated fat. It's actually only 50% saturated fat, and the rest of that is made up of other types of fatty acids. So it's a really versatile fat that way. It's kind of, if you're used to cooking with coconut oil, you can think of it in kind of the same way, except that it doesn't have that coconut flavor that people are so turned off on. It's much more flavorless, and so much so that you can use it in baking as kind of like just a base fat, the way that you would butter in most cases.
Yeah.
I think when we originally started using lard, before we were buying whole pigs, was we had attended a Balanced Bite seminar, like one of the original ones, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. And I have had my gallbladder removed before I was paleo. and it's very difficult for me to digest fats. And it hadn't occurred to me that certain kinds of fats would be more easy to digest than others. And Diane has a really good information on her site and her seminar about the importance of choosing the right fats or the right cooking oils. And she had recommended lard alongside butter and coconut oil as being some of the best ones and easy for your body to digest. And at the time, I wasn't doing any casein at all, so I couldn't do butter. And I was tired of everything tasting like coconut oil. So I gave lard a try, and we kind of never looked back. We've used lard a lot since then. Even before we were rendering our own, we were buying it from the farmer, and using it as our cooking fat, our cooking oil, and almost everything, because it was the only thing my body easily digested other than coconut oil.
Wow. That's really interesting. I was shocked by when we first started making it ourselves, or rendering it, I should say, ourselves, by exactly what you described, how tasteless it is. I was expecting it to taste like pig.
No, that's bacon fat.
Yeah. And it's not at all. It's very benign. It's almost like a texture more than anything else. Yeah. Right? It doesn't distract from the flavor in foods.
Yeah. There's a lot of purees and mashes in the book because lard adds an amazing mouthfeel to those kinds of foods where it's creamier than butter. It's like adding butter and heavy cream to something. Yeah. And it's amazing. And it's not salty. It's not flavored. It's umami, as the Nom Nom would say, it's just wonderful.
Totally. So I'm curious, when you guys made that switch from, doing whatever you were doing before to eating the whole pig and a lot of organ meats and that sort of thing, were there noticeable effects on the way that you felt? I know that for me, when I first started getting into bone broth, and even today, we try to make it like once a week. When I have it, I get like this huge rush of like everything good. It like feels warm on the inside. I feel like vitamins zooming into my brain, and it's hard to describe, but it feels amazing. Did you guys experience?
Yeah, I have broth breakfast every morning now because it's better than a cup of coffee for me.
Yeah.
And Matt has started making heart stew. There's a recipe in the book for what's called huntsman stew. I can't actually eat tomatoes, so I don't eat that recipe. But I eat a version of that basically without tomatoes. It's just vegetable stock and heart, which is a wonderful braising meat. And so between the organ meats and the stock, I'm like ready to go. There's no way I could have a full-time job, 3 kids, a blog, a podcast, books, and still have energy if I wasn't, eating right. Yeah. And I started to do the autoimmune paleo protocol like a year ago, maybe 9 months ago. And in the beginning, I wasn't adding a bunch of organ meat. I wasn't doing much more. I mean, I was drinking some broth, but maybe like twice a week. I wasn't kind of committed to it. And once I started incorporating organ meats, like I make sure that I eat organ meats now 5 times a day, and I eat, 5 times a week. Yes.
A day would be pretty impressive.
And I also consume broth almost every single day in some way or another, either in the, braising of vegetables and I have soup for breakfast, like 6 out of 7 days a week. So wow. I've noticed a huge difference in my ability to tolerate foods that I once had an intolerance to, like dairy. I mentioned that I wasn't eating casein at the time. Since incorporating organ meats and bone broth into my diet, as well as doing kind of a longer elimination diet of things like nuts and eggs and nightshades that can be irritating to people with autoimmune conditions, because I have celiac disease, I've now reincorporated a lot of those foods without any sort of problem at all.
Yeah.
And where I used to have autoimmune flares and my skin would go crazy if I would eat even a bite of something with butter, I can now have, I wish that I didn't know this because it's a problem. I can now eat like Jenny's ice cream and I don't have those problems anymore, and now it's like a willpower thing. Like, well, I want the Jenny's, but I shouldn't eat the Jenny's. Rather than before, it was like, I can't eat the Jenny's because my knees will hurt so bad tomorrow. I can't walk,
Sure.
So, I think
you'll often say to me, like, I don't feel right today. Mm-hmm. Oh man, I haven't eaten any organ meats in 3 days.
Yeah.
Do we have any liver laying around or something like me?
I love that.
Pretty ridiculous.
Liver is the new chocolate.
That's right.
Yeah. Actually, we were at a party last night, a party for Matt's family, and none of them are paleo. And they were making jokes about sugar. Did you hear your grandfather like asking about what's in the cake or whatever? And he was asking, is it low calorie? Is it low fat? And I was like, didn't you hear? Saturated fat's in, salt is in, sugar is out. You know, and I was just making the joke over and over again, and they thought it was funny. But yeah, I think
I love that.
it is what it is. You know, it's organ meat's in, bone broth is in. Just do it.
It is. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. I think it's curious how quickly paleo has grown.
Oh, yeah.
And just in the past few years, you know, going to the seminar you said 3 years ago compared to going to one today is a completely
night and
different
day.
experience,
Sure.
you know? And I think one of the reasons for that is even when I started up my own blog and podcast, like thinking about diet, nutrition, especially for dudes, that's not cool. Right? That's not cool at all. But it's starting to become cool. Yeah. Like thinking about your body and your own health, probably because things are getting so bad everywhere else. Like the counterpoint is that, you know, being healthy is starting to be cool again. I think that's really promising. And one thing that your book and the materials that you guys put out enables us to do, it's almost like you're the influencer of influencers, right? Like all of the bloggers know what you guys are up to, the podcasters and that sort of thing, because you're foodies. And like all of the people at the top who are running the blogs or writing the books or whatever, they're not just like really into fat loss tactics. They're really into food. So can you talk to people about who might have like gotten into paleo, it works well for them, but they're kind of looking for that next thing? How do you get into the real foodie type stuff that comes along with all this? And that's where the real fun is. How do you get into that?
I mean, how do you not get into that?
That's true. That's a good point.
Matt and I love food.
Yeah. I, you know, just 3 years ago, I had never cooked dinner in my life that wasn't from some sort of package to begin with, right? Yeah. And it was a slow progress for me to. I just went from thing to thing. Like I at first I started cooking, you know, just this little thing, like one dish I knew how to cook, and I could cook that one thing. Mm-hmm. And then it became so interesting to me how a meal came together that I just kept learning more and trying to do things on my own and instead of following recipes. And just it is an interesting thing once you get over that initial step of, you know, feeling like the first thing that you make has to be an award-winning James Beard award-winning dish. It doesn't. You know, if you learn how to boil a root vegetable well, then that's one thing that you can do. It's a cool hobby because there's always more to learn. And despite what people think about it being so scary, like it doesn't really matter if you mess up badly. Yeah. Like, you still have meat. It's maybe overcooked, but it's still meat.
Even
still
if something it's not edible, you can just go get Peruvian chicken, you know, like, or eat tuna out of a can, or like whatever, you know, if you try and you experiment, like the worst that's going to happen is you're not going to want to eat it. You know, it's not like it's some life-threatening thing. If you do it wrong, you've messed someone up and blah, 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 blah. But
sure.
Yeah, I think another thing that we're really into that helps us be inspired is we like to watch cooking shows. And specifically, we like to watch cooking shows with our boys. Our boys have a passion for science, so they really like to watch Mythbusters. They also really like to watch Alton Brown, and they like to watch Chopped. I think Chopped is really exciting because they can imagine what it would be like to put 4 insane things that don't match together into a meal. And so sometimes my sons will say, that's the paleo basket, or we've cooked with that before. And sometimes they'll see things they don't know what it is, and they'll say, can we try to find that? I want to taste what that tastes like. And it inspires them to want to kind of step outside of their box and say, oh, I've never seen that crazy ingredient. And they love to go to the Asian food market where they have like everything you've ever wanted under the sun.
And a lot of things you don't.
And they like to kind of play in the produce area and pick a thing or two that they've never tried before. They like to go to the seafood department and see everything that's still alive. And they always want to try new things. And I think it's really about how you frame things in your mind. You know, if you frame it like, oh, it's so intimidating, it's so scary, then that's how it's going to be. But if you tell yourself like, this is a culinary adventure, this is a science experiment, this is, you know, exciting.
It's fun.
Then do it, you know, and then if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. I mean, we tried bitter melon once and everybody in the family was like, oh, I don't know who's eating that. Like, but we tried it and it was fine.
And you learned from it. But one thing I'd love to cover with you guys is it seems like you've obviously had some success with your kids, and so many people struggle with getting their kids to eat the right foods or even care about food at all. I worked a lot with kids when I was doing consulting with the government for the Department of Education, and a lot of these kids didn't really know what vegetables were. Right. If they saw a picture of a cucumber, they're like, I have no idea what that is. Like they just didn't know. They'd never really experienced it. How did you get your kids into food and to care about food in that way and making it fun and interesting?
Yeah.
It's really all about the way that you present it.
Yeah.
If it becomes a battle of wills, like you must eat this because it is healthy and you're not leaving this table until you eat this thing that you say that you don't like, if it becomes a battle of wills, there's just going to be more resistance.
Yeah.
We tried our very best to not do it that way, to make it an adventure, to make it a participatory thing. Like they were always cooking with us and picking out the things that we were going to eat. And it was a collaborative effort between us and our kids to change our diet. And at never, or at least I don't remember, and I may be choosing not to remember, that we had like a kind of battle of wills with them. It was always, here's what we're doing, let's do it together, and making it a much more positive thing rather than a, no, you're not doing that, and you will do this.
Right.
Well, and it's not like our kids are perfect either. Like just because one of my kids loves salad, like he psychotically loves salad. Awesome. My other kid, you even put lettuce on the table and he starts shouting, I don't want salad. But they each have what they like, just like as we as adults have flavors and tastes and foods that we prefer over others. I think a large part of it is really listening to and respecting your children.
Yeah.
And if you only give them options for chicken nuggets and French fries for the first 5 years of their life, and then suddenly throw steamed broccoli at them, they're not going to be used to that flavor. They're not going to be used to that texture. They're not going to be used to that color, and they're going to resist because it's not what you kind of raised them on. And then, then we're talking about a transition, and we're talking about a larger issue that's going to take time to kind of deal with and ease somebody into. But if you're starting to feed your kids real food from the beginning and you're giving them what you're eating. I mean, my kids did something called baby-led weaning, which basically meant when they were ready, they moved from exclusively being breastfed to starting to eat solids off of our table. There wasn't really a period of time where we gave them baby food. There were first few foods that we gave them to make sure they didn't have allergies and they learned how to swallow and that sort of thing. But then it was like, here's what we're having. Let me mash it with my fork. Have at it, And I think that really aids in their understanding of there is peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There is no chicken nugget. There's no anything else. This is what we're having for dinner. And there are a few foods that they really don't like. They don't like eggplant. Like they had a bad experience with eggplant one time. And after that, they so much as like think that you're thinking about eggplant and they start screaming.
Really?
So we just don't buy eggplant. Like it would be cruel to put eggplant on the table all the time because we know that they don't like it. It's not because they're just being difficult. It's because they genuinely don't like the taste of eggplant. And it's the same thing with mushrooms. Like one of my kids loves mushrooms. The other one doesn't like mushrooms. And I think, the key that we do is we make sure that they have options. We invite them to go shopping with us. We invite them to participate in the meal planning. And then when we put food on the table, there's never just one vegetable. There's multiples. There's usually 2 or 3 vegetables on the table so that if someone doesn't want mushrooms or someone doesn't want salad, then we say, no problem, just eat carrots.
Yeah.
And it's not a, you must do this, you must try this, you must blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, if you don't want that, sure, have carrots, know, and then it's like, oh, okay. And our 5-year-old, who is very willful, sometimes says he doesn't want any vegetables at all. And then we kind of joke about him being a pirate and, oh, he's going to get scurvy. And everybody at the table starts making pirate faces and noises. And then we look over and shockingly, he's putting vegetables in his mouth. That's awesome. He doesn't want scurvy. And I just think if you keep it fun and entertaining, then your kids don't, it's not a matter of, fighting like Matt said.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Now, what about, you guys specifically, when you switched your own style of eating, Matt, you talked about being around your family and friends. Sometimes they can be a huge drag on any sort of change in your life. How did you guys navigate that when you basically got into this lifestyle and started to have a lot of success with it?
A lot of explaining,
Yeah.
and a lot of insisting that this is not something that we're doing on a whim, that this is something that we have chosen to do for ourselves, and we are very serious about it. And then from there, a lot of volunteering to make food for people, to show them that we weren't doing something crazy.
Yeah.
This wasn't something that was going to be hard for them to adapt to when we came over. And eventually they got it. Eventually having published a book really convinced them that we were being really serious.
Losing
so it's easier for us.
Losing 200 pounds and writing a book kind of made them realize, like, they're doing this thing. Like,
what if people don't have that luxury?
I should keep encouraging them to eat the pizza and cake. Like, they're actually not going to eat the pizza and cake. And not everybody has that, right? Not everybody is going to have the success story that we have. Not everybody is going to have, a blog or a book or whatever to kind of just say to their family and friends, like, look, be quiet. I'm doing this thing, know? But I think everybody does have their own success story, whether or not it's, like you said, vitamins rushing to your brain and giving you energy, or, whether or not it's reduced depression, reduced inflammation, better gut health, you feel better, whatever your success story is, tell your family and friends that and say point blank, when you encourage me to eat this food that I'm trying not to eat, you are sabotaging me, whether or not you want to. And I know that you want me to be social and to interact with you, and I'm here. I'm happy to be social and interact with you. I don't need to eat this food to experience life with you.
Yeah.
And there are very few people who are going to not respect that. There are very few people who are going to really pressure you. And those are the people that you really need to share information with. Mm-hmm. There are family and friends, especially when you have children, who are going to be genuinely concerned about your health, or who are going to be concerned about your children's health and what you might be doing with a lack of fiber or calcium or whatever it is. And that's where you really need to get educated and share information with them if it's coming from a place of genuine concern. But for the most part, people just don't even realize what they're doing. And these are the people that you got unhealthy with to begin with, or, whatever the case may be. And so if they're going to choose to continue to try to drag you down, you need to choose whether or not that person is really a good, positive influence in your life.
Yeah. And generally speaking, I found that it gets a lot easier over time as they see that as a part of who you are. At this point for you guys, you've written several books about it. You've obviously had tremendous success and you've improved your own health. So that becomes, it doesn't become more difficult over time. And also the people who you surround yourself with, I'm sure you're hanging out with a lot more foodies than you used to, and people who are into the whole paleo thing. So it makes it easier that way too. So I know that's one of the biggest things at the beginning when anyone makes that change. They're getting this negative feedback from everyone around them. Their doctor's saying that this is going to kill you if you eat butter or lard, right? And their well-meaning mother or aunt is saying there's no way you can feed that to your children. But it's fascinating to see that these very things that you're starting to do again, that are leading you down this path of health, are the same things that like our great grandmothers did for our families for health, but somewhere like what happened in between? You guys have a good portion of the book that's dedicated to, saying like Crisco versus real fat. Like, can you kind of explain that a bit?
We did that last night at the party with your grandparents. We just walked through that same exact conversation.
Yeah. My grandfather grew up on a farm. And in fact, my other grandfather still runs a farm. In fact,
oh, cool.
I forget whether he currently has a dairy farm or a pig farm, because it's gone back and forth a couple of times. But he's, I have two grandfathers who grew up on farms, and hearing some of the stories is kind of really fascinating. And last night we were talking with my dad's father, who grew up on a farm, and he was talking about butchering pigs and how they would hang hams and they'd render out the lard and they would corn things and they would do all these different ways to preserve things. So her grandmother, or my great grandmother, his mother, would spend all this time canning things and preserving things. Everything that she found, she was canning and preserving. hours picking berries, hours picking vegetables, and just preserving all this food.
Yeah.
Because that's what you had to do to make it, right? Because
they didn't have a refrigerator.
Yeah.
there's no refrigerator.
Yeah.
So
they also didn't have heart disease and, all the kind of like modern problems that we have that are so rampant right now. There's a graph included in the book, and it's like this, and then it goes like this, straight up a hill as soon as we start introducing man-made foods.
It just became easier for people to go to a grocery store and get their food. That's the one.
Got it.
It became easier to go to a grocery store and pick up things rather than to spend all that time and effort to do these things that we never realized were key to our health.
Yeah.
There's all these. We also include lots of advertisements from Crisco, right? Crisco was the competitor with lard and butter, because it was, hey, you've been using this stuff, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Here's a can of stuff you can scoop in.
Shelf stable. You don't have to worry about it. Just buy this can.
And it ends up being, hydrogenated vegetable oils, instead of, or actually cottonseed oil back then, instead of a real fat that you really gotten from a natural source.
Yeah. And
that's when these trans fats that are in Crisco, that's what the hydrogenated oils are, is trans fats, which we know are bad for your health. That's when they entered into our diet, and that's when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's all been a progression up into modern times of us finding more convenience over health. And it's unfortunate, but if you want to get your health back, you should think about not going for the most convenient thing that you can, and rather, instead of spending a little bit of time to make something.
Well, and I likened it to it all happened about the same time that we put a man on the moon. And there were a lot of choices that Americans made that weren't so great around that time, because we felt like we put a man on the moon, we can do anything. And, another thing that happened around that time is doctors started encouraging women to no longer breastfeed because we had invented formula, and doctors were convinced that formula was better for a baby. They weren't trying to be bad. They were saying, like, we came up with this thing and we're sure that it's healthier for a baby than breast milk. And so a bunch of women around that time period were told to stop nursing their babies and start using formula, because after 6 weeks, formula is better, or whatever the case was. And turns out, shockingly, science has now figured out that formula isn't the best thing over breast milk. And actually the real deal, the natural stuff that's available to humans and made for humans, is what they need to be optimally nourished. It's the same thing with food. We invented Crisco. We invented, what's that orange stuff? Tang. We invented a bunch of crazy things all around that same time. And we were convinced that it was wonderful and awesome. And it's not, right? It's terrible for us. And so it's just a matter of getting back to basics. And sometimes it can feel weird and overwhelming and intimidating. It's a lot of time in the kitchen. Like, there's no way around that. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
Not all of the recipes in our book are a huge time investment, but, we recommend people do basics. And if you're crunched for time, then spend your Saturday morning or your Sunday evening, working up your basics so that you have lard and stock for the week. Don't feel like you need to do all that stuff every single night. And then once you have your basics down, then it's just a matter of putting some veg and putting some meat and, heating it up in some way or another, because you've already got all the original stuff already made. But it is a time investment. And if people aren't willing to make that investment in themselves and their health, then there's nothing anybody else can do to help them with that. We all need to be committed to say, it is worth my time to spend 2 hours in the kitchen prepping to make some lard and some stock and prep my veggies so that I don't have to chop as much later in the week, or I don't, whatever it is that you're going to do to kind of help yourself along. If you're a busy person, you have to invest that time.
Yeah. I just got that question from someone, but you guys are much better equipped to handle this. So for the people who come to you and they start paleo or this new style of eating, and they say they don't have time, I'm sure your faces must get so red as you bite your tongue, right? Because you have, all these kids running around, you're writing books, keeping up a blog, like it's your lives must be crazy, but yet you still make plenty of time to cook. So what sort of advice would you give to someone like that who comes to you? You're just like, I'm a busy parent, I don't have time to cook. What do you say?
I say literally, because we get this question multiple times a week.
Yeah.
we tell people, if you want to do this, you will figure out a way. And here are some tools that we have. Here are some, we have podcasts that we've done, tips and tricks to help people kind of, these are our advice. Here's what we recommend. Get a crock pot, get a pressure cooker, do your prep on the weekends. Basic things like that can help a lot of people. But if someone isn't willing to do that, if someone is still going to say, well, my specific circumstance is preventing me from doing this, and I'm a snowflake, and I have this one thing that is different than from what you have, and that's why it's harder for me. It's like, okay, it sounds like you're not ready. Like if someone really wants to do this, they will, and there's no amount of arm twisting that anyone can do to force someone into doing something or being ready. And most of the time when we get these questions, it's not even a question. It's just someone saying, I love your blog, but I can't be paleo because blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, when you're ready, the information's there, like
it's a question of where are your priorities. I mean, there's very few things that are truly important, and the health of you and your family is probably way up there, right? Like,
not even long-term health, like short-term health.
Right.
Enjoy the time that you have energy with your children,
And if this is going to make you healthier, then I think that should be one of your top priorities, is to make time to make good food.
How much time would you guys say at the minimum you would need for your family?
Matt doesn't take shortcuts.
Yeah.
We don't like the slow cooker. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I prefer to watch things cook rather than set it up and forget it. But I would say that I probably spend about an hour making dinner every day, and about 20 to 30 minutes every morning making breakfast. And then we've used some deal of shortcuts to make lunch easier. I mean, pre-prepared meats or leftovers for lunch. So that's one meal that I don't have to spend a whole lot of time on. But I would say an hour and a half easily every day making things. Yeah. And there are certainly ways that people out there can do things better than me.
Yeah.
I'm by no means an expert on time management.
Sure.
Like Matt cooks fresh eggs for the boys every single morning.
Wow.
And there are plenty of ways to make egg muffins, frittatas, or whatever, to pull something out of the fridge and reheat it. Our boys have gotten spoiled by having Matt as their dad. And so one of them is like, I want fried eggs. And the other one's like, I want scrambled eggs. And so Matt's like a short order cook in there. Making eggs for
what
everybody.
I say is we're going to choose right now whether we're having fried eggs or scrambled eggs.
But, and the other thing that we do that does save time is because I don't eat eggs. I don't eat nightshades. I don't eat some things that the other family members do. Is Matt makes one big pot of soup for me, every kind of week. Either he makes pork stock and then he'll take leftover vegetables and meat and kind of put it together in one container for me to have for breakfast, or he makes one big pot of soup on the weekend. And then when I want something for breakfast or when I want something for dinner that isn't necessarily what everybody else is having, then I can just go grab that. I don't need to kind of have a short order cook situation. I don't need a special meal. And it rarely happens for dinner because all of us eat that way just to make it easier. But for breakfast, I can't have eggs, and everybody else has eggs, so I just have soup, and then we don't have to worry about it.
My favorite thing to do is to, saute vegetables for Stacy, cut up carrots, onions, celery, what have you. Cook that for Stacy, and then take half of that I've just sauteed and put it into an omelet for the boys, and the other half into a soup for Stacy. And that way everyone gets, I've saved some time.
Yeah.
Not that I'm into saving time, clearly.
Fortunately for us, honestly, I think it's where Matt gets some quiet time, right? Like he actually enjoys being in the kitchen. And that's not something that 3 years ago he would have said. He would have said he was horrified to spend time in the kitchen. But I think part of the reason that you don't make shortcuts in the kitchen is because you actually enjoy being in there, that the kids aren't, in your face asking you to play Pokemon or build this Lego thing.
Oh, no, they still do that, but I can say...
You can say, I'm cooking right now.
You have an excuse. Right now. You have an obvious excuse, at least.
Yeah. So, and I see him in there. He usually is listening to podcasts while he's cooking and taking some time for himself. And I think that's part of the message that we're saying, right? Is like, you just have to learn to relax into this and enjoy it and make it positive for yourself. And then then it's not this overwhelming thing that stresses you out, because people just are too stressed out these days.
I love that. You know, it's so many people are just like, well, I don't have time for it. And so cooking is this very stressful thing that they have to do. But what if you reframe that like you guys did? And it's like, cooking is my me time. This is when I relax. This is my own little meditation. For me, it's making coffee in the morning. I love doing that. I roast it at home, and it's like this, yeah, it's more work, but it's so fresh and it tastes so much better. And it's like, you get to appreciate that few minutes out of your day that you're spending doing something that you really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is so cool. I love how positive that is. We're coming up on time, but I did want you guys to talk a little bit about salt. It goes perfectly with pork, especially, and you guys talked a little bit in this book particularly about how to use salt to improve the flavor. Can you talk about what most Americans anyway think of as salt is not, and what's better than that?
Well, what most people think of salt, the table salt that you usually have is the tiny, tiny crystals that you can pour from a packet or a salt shaker. And I don't think that I've used an actual salt shaker in 3 years at this point.
Wow. That's cool.
It's going to be a much better experience if you're not getting that uniform salt crystal.
And processed junk in it too. It's not just even salt. It's
right.
It's like a chemical more than it's food.
Yeah.
But what I usually get is there's several different kinds that I get, and I like sea salt and just regular white sea salt. You know, you're already making a big step in a more interesting direction.
Yeah.
And I put it in a grinder and I grind it like pepper, and it makes for a much more enjoyable experience. Stacy's a really big fan of salt. I can't salt things enough for Stacy. And
it's a problem.
And the grinder's always out.
Awesome.
But on top of that, it's also fun to look at all the different kinds of sea salt. You can get red, you can get black, you can get pink, you can get all that.
Kelp.
And then there are other things that kelp is one of my favorites, because the reason why there's such a thing as iodized salt is because there was a severe iodine deficiency. They made people sick all over the place, and led to really gross things like goiters.
Yeah.
And we decided that the best place to enrich our diets with the iodine was to put in our salt, because everybody was salting their food. But you don't get that when you get like a regular sea salt, or even some kosher salts. They don't add the iodine, and so people find today that a lot of people who are really conscious about their health are still iodine deficient because they're no longer using that salt. And think about it this way: all the processed foods that they used to eat are all so full of that iodized salt. So you're never going to get an iodine deficiency until you start eating fresh food.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. So they make kelp salt, which actually has kelp in it, which is a good source of iodine. So you're sprinkling iodine in the kelp with the salt. So you're getting both nutrients together again. And it's actually got that kind of a really great taste, really deep umami kind of flavor.
Yeah.
You're getting that sea flavor, and I put it on all of our seafood dishes and all our Asian dishes. It goes really well.
I love it in soup. I used to love it on eggs.
Yeah.
It's what we finish our dishes with, right? Like there's a finishing salt. So you can do fleur de sal, you can do sea salt, you can do whatever. What we finish our dishes with is kelp salt. And then we usually cook with, sea salt or sometimes even kosher salt, depending on what the need is. But, there's like studies out now that, are saying it's becoming a health hazard for people that they're not eating enough salt, not just from an iodine perspective, but salt is actually a necessary mineral for our bodies, sodium. So, it's important for people to understand that, especially when you're eating a paleo diet, if you're cutting out all processed foods and you're no longer getting your salt from somewhere else, you've got to salt your food. You've got to put it in there because it's necessary for your body to function healthfully.
Right. People's blood pressure actually.
Yes, absolutely.
People used to be worried that they would have increased high blood pressure if they ate too much salt. But a big problem now that's increasing is too low blood pressure from not enough salt. So It's one of those things that you got to get in right proportion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we're just about out of time, but before we go, why don't we talk about what you guys are working on now, probably Beyond Bacon, and or what you're releasing now, and what you're working on next, and where people can find you.
Oh God, we are working on nothing next.
There you go. That sounds.
I have heard all kinds of ideas about what we need to do next, and it's always met with a death stare. What we're doing next is spending some time together.
You deserve it.
Yeah. So we're definitely doing some interviews and launching the book. It comes out July 2nd. That takes up a lot of our time right now. And we're just really grateful for all the feedback that we're getting. Hearing from you that it's weird is a compliment. We're hearing from people that it's the kind of book that they want to put next to Joy of Cooking on their book, because there's a lot of, information. It's not just kind of recipes. It's a lot more than that. And so we're really, really grateful that people see that side of the book and are, appreciating it as a high quality thing. And so we're fielding all those reviews and crying ourselves to sleep at night out of joy. And spending some time with our kids. Our kids are, sadly, they missed out on some time with us over the last couple of months. So, working on spending quality time with them and giving them some love. It's summertime, so we're going to get back into visiting farms and picking and doing all that kind of stuff. And in the meantime, we're keeping up with the blog. We have our own podcast. I co-host with the Paleo mom, Sarah Ballantyne, and I do a show called The Paleo View that Matt produces. So we do that every week. And that's plenty for us, for sure.
Always at paleoparents.com.
Yeah.
You need to check out.
Awesome. Yeah. Please, anyone who's listening or watching out there, check out Beyond Bacon. It's a killer book, as well as paleoparents.com, because you guys just put out so much great stuff and everyone deserves to know about it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for...
Dinosaur.
What's that?
We forgot to mention our first cookbook, Eat Like Dinosaur. So if people are interested in doing more of like the kid thing, this is definitely our what we're stating as our children. Our grown-up version, right? This is for foodies. This is for grown-ups. This is, the serious book. Of course, our kids all ate and tested these recipes happily, save for maybe the chorizo because it's a bit spicy. But our first cookbook, Eat Like a Dinosaur, is much more family friendly.
Yeah.
So,
and another great book.
Thank you.
If I may say.
Much different purpose. But
totally different. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. You're welcome anytime.
Thanks, Abel. It's great to see you again, if not
you too.
so far.
Yeah. Enjoy your summer.
Thanks. You too.
You too.